Parliament resumed today, and our parliamentary affairs correspondent Joseph Gakpo joins me live from there with an update. Joseph, good to speak to you. What exactly is happening right now in Parliament?
The House is on break at the moment, and then the House is on this suspension because the Finance Committee of Parliament is meeting to consider a number of items that government laid before MPs earlier today. And once the Finance Committee is done, they will bring back a report recommending approval for the House to approve those. And let me run you through those items in a while. First of all, there's a request for tax waiver for frontline healthcare persons. As you recall, the President announced for 3 different months in order to motivate them to be able to do their work better in terms of helping deal with the COVID-19 virus spread. So that request for approval has come to Parliament. You know that there is no tax waiver that can happen without parliamentary approval. So that's before the House. Additionally, you recall the President said healthcare workers will be getting up to 50% basic salary in terms of allowance, those who are doing the frontline work. They'll be getting a tax waiver on that particular allowance as well. So they wouldn't have to get any tax deduction from that additional 50% additional allowance on their basic salary. That's also been laid before Parliament as well. You know, Ghana has gotten a number of donations from international organizations like the Jack Ma Foundation, like the Chinese government, and per regular procedure, any donation that happens that's imported into the country as far as the items are concerned, taxes need to be paid on that. But again, government is requesting for approval to get a tax waiver on that. That's also been referred to the Finance Committee. And the fourth thing that's been referred to them is that per the regulations governing the Ghana Revenue Authority, at the end of the year, there is a 4-month period within which individuals and agencies are supposed to file their various tax returns. That 4-month grace period is being extended to 6 months. So that amendment is also happening, and that again has been referred to Parliament Committee when it comes to finance to consider. So we are waiting for them to bring back their report. Earlier in the day, a number of things happened. The Deputy Health Minister, Dr. Bernard Okoboy, was on the floor of Parliament to update MPs on government's effort to deal with the COVID-19 and also cerebrospinal meningitis. He read a statement on behalf of the Health Minister, Dr. Kukwajiman-Menu, and in his words, these 2 diseases have been contained both in the southern and northern parts of the country, and further efforts are ongoing to actually keep Ghanaians safe. MPs contributed to the statement and virtually encouraged government to do a lot more in terms of ensuring that PPEs are available and that the right vaccines are brought in to help deal with the cerebrospinal meningitis situation. Apart from that, there's been some concerns that have been raised on the floor of Parliament. Lawyer Roxinda Fiamakpo, who is the MP for South Dai, drew the Speaker's attention that he filed an urgent question that was directed towards the Attorney General, because there's been a development. One other minority MP, the MP for Daboya, Mahama Shaibu, has written officially to the Office of the Attorney General, and he's asking that the Attorney General direct state agencies, including the National Health Insurance Scheme, so that then donations that have actually gone out to the COVID-19 National Trust Fund are refunded. His 2-page letter to the AG says, per the law that Parliament approved to govern the sources of funding for the COVID-19 National Trust Fund, it doesn't include monies from the public purse. It's supposed to come from private persons and other private organizations. So he says any donation that's coming from state agencies is illegal, and so the Attorney General should oversee a situation where those monies will be refunded to the state agencies. The MP for North Dai said that he had sought to get the Attorney General on the floor to respond to questions on that, but the majority leader said that that is something that has to be dealt with on a different platform. So those have been some of the developments right on the floor of Parliament. But just to round up with this, interestingly, on a day that minority MPs are raising questions about how come government agencies, including the NHIA, is contributing to the COVID-19 National Trust Fund, well, Parliament as an institution has just handed over a check of 200,000 Ghana cedis to the COVID-19 National Trust Fund. Officials from the fund were present here in Parliament to receive that particular check. And as far as Speaker Professor Michael Quay, as well as Majority Leader Oseiche Mensah Bonsu are concerned, this is an effort to encourage more Ghanaians to donate more to the fund. And you recall that majority MPs had donated a separate 100,000 Ghana cedi to the fund. Oseiche Mensah Bonsu clarified and said that that's a separate amount, and Parliament as an institution has actually donated up to 200,000 Ghana cedis, and the check was handed over by Professor Michael Quay to the fund a little earlier in the day. So I had a conversation with Archbishop Justice Akrofi, asking him about the concerns that have come from the minority MPs that public funds shouldn't be going back into the COVID-19 National Trust Fund. And he says that for them, any amount that's coming in is something that they are ready to make use of. If Parliament as an institution that actually established the fund is donating money to them, then it probably means that they have the right to accept donations even from state agencies. So those have been the conversations, and the House has been on break for well about 3 hours now. We are waiting for them to resume around 5 p.m. when the tax waivers and also the amendment to the provisions having to the GRA, as I mentioned earlier, a report on that will be brought from the Finance Committee for MPs to deliberate on and approve before the House eventually adjourns sitting indefinitely a little later this evening.
This is fascinating, Joseph, especially that final detail about the donation. Tell us what you can about the source of this money. Is it contributions from individual members of Parliament, or is it from the Parliament's own budget, which of course comes from the public purse?
From the explanation that we're getting, this is actually something that's coming from Parliament's own budget and also Parliament as an institution. We saw a copy of the check that was actually issued to the COVID-19 National Trust Fund, and it's a check which is actually with the Bank of Ghana, and this is a check with the Accra branch, and this is a check that has a note on it that says that parliamentary business, program 2, when it comes to parliamentary business, that's actually the source of the funding from the accounts of the Bank of Ghana. So the indication is that this is actually money that's coming directly from Parliament as an institution. The Speaker, Professor Michael Quay, reminded the officials of the COVID-19 National Trust Fund that himself, he's donated half of his salary over a 3-month period to the COVID-19 National Trust Fund. And this is an announcement he made about 3 weeks ago. And he reminded them that if that deduction hasn't happened on his account separately to the fund yet, then he's reminding them to contact the Finance Department of Parliament to actually get that. And Oseiche Mensah Bonsu clarified that this 200,000 Ghana cedis is separate from an amount that MPs donated previously to the fund. So the indication we're getting is that this 200,000 cedis is actually from Parliament as an institution, coming from their budgets as a state organization and not individual members of Parliament or from the Speaker's personal resources, because those monies have actually been deducted separately.
How did the minority react to this 200,000 cedi donation?
We are still waiting to get them to comment on that. You know, this was an exercise that should have happened with the leadership of Parliament on both the majority and the minority side present, but they were conspicuously missing from that particular meeting, with just Oseiche Mensah Bonsu, the majority leader, as well as the Speaker, Professor Michael Quay, handing over the check. The minority leader was not present at that particular meeting, and neither were any members on the minority side, nor the leadership on the minority side. Looks like they've made up their mind that this is not an exercise that they were ready and willing to participate in, because they felt it wasn't right to a certain extent.
Right, fascinating stuff. No doubt we'll be hearing from them directly on this matter. But just a general question about how Parliament has been operating in these COVID-19 times. Obviously, all state institutions are operating with limited human and other resources. Has that affected Parliament's ability to check details of all these bills that are passing through to be passed into law? Are they finding it more difficult? Are they working a bit slower because of limited resources due to COVID-19? Or are they simply moving things through to keep time?
So for now, the focus in terms of the work that they are doing is specifically limited to issues having to do with COVID-19. And from the indication that they give us, they are doing the necessary scrutiny, they are doing the necessary analysis of the requests that come before them. And they are having the time and the space to be able to do that because they are focusing specifically on issues having to do with COVID-19. For example, there was a document that was brought to Parliament earlier today requesting for approval for a loan facility in order to support the Eastern Corridor Road project. And right on the floor, the conversation was that that is something that, although the document was being laid, is being shelved, and the Finance Committee would look at it a little later in the year, without taking it as anything urgent, and that the focus is specifically on issues having to do with COVID-19. You know that Parliament has directed that all national service people and non-essential staff do not show up right here on the premises, and that they support the work of parliamentarians from home, including all the research assistants. So because it's virtually limited business that's focused on COVID-19, and right now, for example, the limitation to it is that the Finance Committee is what is dealing with a lot of it. The indication is that they are having the time to be able to do the necessary scrutiny as they've done previously, by virtue of the fact that those are the specific agenda that they are focusing on, and not exactly a broad range of issues. But I'm sure we will know more when we see, for example, the report of the Finance Committee on the request for tax waivers, which is expected to be laid in Parliament a little later today, as we await for that report for those approvals to be given. But there's been the effort to ensure that virtually all MPs on the floor are wearing their face masks. There's a lot of talk about social distancing when journalists need to do interviews with members of Parliament. And as far as they are concerned, all the necessary precautionary measures are being taken.
Joseph Gakpo, thank you so much for that, as always, concise update from Parliament.